Here's a question you have probably never asked yourself. Why does a diamond cost more than a house-sized chunk of almost any other clear rock on Earth? The honest answer has very little to do with rarity. Diamonds are not that rare. What made them valuable was one of the most successful marketing campaigns in human history, and it worked so well that most people still believe the opposite of the truth. Let's start with the rock itself. Diamonds are made of carbon, squeezed under heat and pressure deep in the earth for millions of years. That sounds impressive, and it is. But geologically speaking, diamonds are not particularly scarce. Massive deposits sit under the ground in Africa, Russia, Canada, and Australia. If every diamond ever mined were dumped onto the open market at once, prices would collapse. So the people who controlled the diamond supply made sure that never happened. That control began in 1888 in South Africa with a company called De Beers. Its founder, Cecil Rhodes, realized that diamonds only had value if they stayed scarce, and the only way to guarantee scarcity was to control almost the entire global supply. So De Beers bought up mines. It formed agreements with producers around the world. By the mid-20th century, it controlled somewhere around 80 to 90% of the world's rough diamond trade. When new deposits were discovered in places like the Soviet Union, De Beers simply negotiated deals to buy up that supply too, keeping it off the open market or releasing it slowly. This is where the economics gets interesting. De Beers did not just mine diamonds. It managed diamonds the way a central bank manages currency. It stockpiled excess stones during slow years and released them carefully during high demand, so prices almost never dropped. For decades, the price of a diamond went essentially in one direction, up. Not because diamonds became harder to find, but because one company decided the price would go up, and it had enough control over supply to make that decision stick. But controlling supply was only half the plan. The other half was convincing the entire world that they wanted diamonds in the first place. And this is where the story turns from economics into pure marketing genius. In the 1930s, the diamond market hit a problem. The Great Depression crushed luxury spending, and on top of that, engagement rings simply were not a universal tradition yet. In many countries, couples exchanged all sorts of tokens, and diamonds were just one option among many, often seen as something only the wealthy bought. De Beers needed people to believe that a diamond was not a luxury choice, but a required one. So in 1938, De Beers hired an advertising agency in New York called N.W. Ayer. The agency's job was not to sell diamonds directly, it was to sell an idea. The idea was that a diamond engagement ring is a necessary, permanent symbol of love, and that no proposal is truly complete without one. The campaign worked across every channel available at the time. Magazine ads showed glamorous couples with diamond rings. Hollywood was quietly encouraged to feature diamonds in films and have movie stars wear them in public. Newspaper columns and etiquette guides began casually mentioning diamond rings as the expected standard for an engagement, often without ever mentioning that a diamond company was behind the messaging. This is sometimes called one of the earliest and most effective examples of what we would now call native advertising or product placement, decades before those terms existed. Then, in 1947, a young copywriter at the agency wrote 4 words that would become one of the most famous advertising slogans ever created. A diamond is forever. The phrase was brilliant for 2 reasons. First, it tied the diamond to permanence, exactly what people want to believe about love and marriage. Second, and more quietly, it discouraged people from ever reselling their diamonds. If a diamond is forever, you keep it forever, you do not trade it in. That single idea protected the resale market from ever undercutting De Beers' new diamond sales, because used diamonds almost never entered public circulation to compete with new ones. The campaign did not stop at slogans. De Beers wanted a benchmark, some rule that would tell men exactly how much they should spend, because a vague sense that diamonds are romantic does not translate into actual purchases. So the marketing introduced a very specific idea. A man should spend 1 month's salary on an engagement ring. Later, in some campaigns, that guideline was pushed up to 2 months' salary. There was no financial or scientific reasoning behind this number. It was simply a marketing benchmark, designed to normalize spending a significant chunk of income on a single small stone. And remarkably, it worked. Even today, decades later, that 1 month or 2 month salary guideline still gets repeated as if it were some kind of natural rule rather than a number invented by an ad agency to sell more diamonds. By the mid-20th century, the results were staggering. Before the campaign, diamond engagement rings were common in only a fraction of marriages in countries like the United States. After a few decades of this marketing, the diamond ring became almost universally expected in Western weddings, and the tradition spread to countries where it had never existed before, including Japan, where diamond engagement rings were nearly unheard of until De Beers ran a similar campaign there in the 1960s and 70s. So here's the strange part. None of this required lying about what a diamond physically is. Diamonds are real, they are hard, they do sparkle beautifully. What was manufactured was not the stone, but the meaning attached to it. The idea that love requires a diamond, that a diamond symbolizes permanence, that spending months of income proves commitment. All of that was built deliberately by one company's marketing department, and it became so deeply embedded in culture that most people now assume it is simply tradition going back centuries. It is not. It is less than 100 years old. Cracks did eventually start to show. Starting in the 1980s and 90s, antitrust regulators in the United States and Europe began investigating De Beers for price fixing, and for decades the company avoided operating directly in the American market to sidestep legal exposure there. Then came an even bigger threat: lab-grown diamonds. These are chemically, physically, and optically identical to mined diamonds, created in a lab in weeks instead of formed over 1 million years underground, and they cost a small fraction of the price. For a while, De Beers tried to market lab-grown diamonds as somehow less authentic or less romantic, an argument that has only partly worked, because as more people learn the actual history of how diamond prices were created in the first place, the idea of scarcity as a natural fact keeps losing ground. De Beers no longer controls the market the way it once did. Its share of the global rough diamond trade has fallen sharply from where it stood decades ago, but the psychological infrastructure it built is still largely intact. Most people getting engaged today still expect a diamond, still have some vague sense that it should cost a certain amount, and still believe, on some level, that this is just how things have always been done. So the next time someone tells you that diamonds are valuable because they are rare, you will know the fuller story. They are valuable because one company, nearly a century ago, decided that they should be, and then spent enormous amounts of money convincing the entire world to agree.